For the record, there has never been a single line of academic research or scientific evidence that tough love as a tactic to cause somebody to change their ways and to ameliorate bad behavior has ever truly been effective in the long term. No scientist appears to have looked into it. There are no studies. There's no support for this idea whatsoever, and there's plenty of people who are willing to testify that it does not work and is ineffective. Nobody seems to have done empirical testing on it. There's no actual source at all saying that it is good at ameliorating people's behavior, which is exactly why I predict, and with great confidence, that Norway and the Nordic countries will fail categorically to reform these women and stress them out of being sex workers, because this is essentially government going down the rabbit hole of the idea being tough love. In Norway, you may have heard per the propaganda of these governments that they've decriminalized it, sex work for women and everything, and criminalized the men, but the way that impacts things is like, the before there would have been risk to both. So, the woman the man would try to use, the fact that he was at risk, but she would say, so am I, and, they would both be on equal terms and that. And so they wouldn't be able to use it. And there was a lot more demand too for what was going on. But then you pass the law and only men are criminalized. And so, only men that are criminals will show up at for these women's services, and now they can make unreasonable demands. They can demand no condom and all this other stuff, because all evaporation of demand for their services has pretty much disappeared entirely. And meanwhile, the Nordic countries are trying to exert tons of pressure on them. They've totally redefined all the terms in such a way where it becomes almost impossible to operate as a sex worker, because what will happen is that there's safety in numbers and everything, but the moment you're working with another woman in your space, or a woman and a man to protect you, well, you're now operating a brothel, even if it's only two people in the fucking unit, and your landlord can be accused of pimping if he's probably because the money and the proceeds from what your transactions are helping you pay the rent. And we forget that a lot of people get into sex work because they have no other source of income, and so you can throw tough love at them all you want, but they don't have any other way of paying the bills, and they've got extensive criminal records now for this, and so nobody's going to hire them doing anything else, at least in the corporate world, where you've got jobs working for an employer. You may be able to find odd jobs here and there doing other things, but that's it, that you're fucked. You have to keep doing crime because you got no other way to make money, and this like I said, there's no body of evidence that tough love as a policy has ever caused anybody to change their ways, at least in the long term. The only evidence that anybody's been able to cite is that it appears to reform behavior sometimes in the short run. Well, who gives a shit? Because in the long run, we have no proof that it's ever been effective, for anybody, ever. There's nobody has gone and did, it's amazing that no scientist has actually gone and conducted a study on this one, as to whether this tactic, works, and this whole, method, and through denying support and and all this other stuff, and taking this cold stance against these workers, and forcing them down, and they're so defensive of it. They're like, well, it should be tough to be a sex worker in society because we don't want women doing this in the first place. We get plenty of comments from them. It's not a bug. It's not a bug at all in the system that that it's dangerous. They've made it more dangerous with this policy on purpose. They've forced them to work with dangerous clients. They've driven up, all the legitimate and nice ones that were respectful away. They've left them only with the ones that are willing to break the law. And most of the time, if somebody's willing to break the law, they're also violent. There's not very many people that are non-violent criminals. And, this is insane. And, this has been going on for a long time now. And, The Nordic model was implemented a long fucking time ago, and they've been trying to tough love people, but they've gotten to the point in which they've had Operation Homeless. They've made these sex workers homeless, and they're still selling sex. How far? They can tough love these girls to death, and they're never ever ever going to stop. It's not going to happen. I don't understand. Why they went down this rabbit hole. I don't what radical feminism told them this. Radical feminism told them that all the women that do this are victims and everything. And that they don't have any agency and everything to be what they are and whatnot. It's them. It's the way they voted. To the voters in these countries, in these Nordic countries, just so you know, there is literally not one single scientific study done anywhere in the world across the entire planet of scientists, anywhere on Earth, that has ever shown tough love to be a tactic that is effective at ameliorating bad behavior. It has not happened. No research whatsoever. So you are starting from a presumption of a social policy that proceeds from a position of basically nothing more than common sense, and common sense could be wrong. For over, did you realize that for most of human history, it was common sense, quote unquote, that the Earth was the center of the universe and the sun revolved around the Earth. That was what people thought. That everything, all the planets, all that other stuff of all out there that we could see, and all the other stars, and all that, that we thought it all revolved around us and our planet, because we were the center of the universe, and the Bible basically said that sort of thing, and and everything, and then we get telescopes, and we got the ability to see, and we begin to realize that the motion of the planets is in a heliocentric fashion, where we revolve around the sun, especially because that's how gravity works, and everything, and it just this is crazy, craziness, and like Elon Musk thinks we're going to Mars, that's not happening. That trip will kill the people going. Anyways, this. I don't know what that has to do with anything, anyways. But anyways, so basically, tough love. There's no studies. There's no scientific evidence. It's never been shown to work. So this idea of let's just lock the buyers up, but also at the same time, crack down on all the infrastructure around the women that are doing it. Anything else, ban them from brochures, ban them from advertising. Do everything in your power to prevent that. Never in the history of this planet has anybody done research that would show that if you wanted to ameliorate the bad behavior or undesirable behavior of somebody, that an effective way to get them to do it was to tough love them out of it. That has never been shown to be an effective therapy. And so we're proceeding from a position of what people believe is common sense, but common sense has never been shown in of itself to be reliable. It's often been wrong throughout history, so there's no reason to put any faith in it.